Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap today. This one is particularly interesting, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to listen to it later on. Following today's webinar, we'll be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's webinar you have a question for any of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. We're going to try and take a few minutes near the end of today's webinar to go through audience questions. We'll do as many as we can, but whatever questions we don't get to during the webinar, our speakers have agreed to take those questions offline with you. So we'll definitely get your questions answered. And then finally, we are doing a giveaway for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. We're going to be doing a drawing at the end of today's webinar. Hopefully you'll be one of our 3 lucky winners. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Eclipse Che, a revolutionary IDE for distributed and mainframe development. Our speakers today are Paul Buck, who is the VP of Community Development at the Eclipse Foundation, Dana Boudreau, who is Product Manager at Broadcom, and Stephen Lemme, and I know I got it wrong, but he's Product Manager at Red Hat. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you all for joining me today. Stephen, I know you are our main speaker, so I'm going to go ahead and put myself on mute and turn it over to you. Let you get to it.
Thank you. Thanks. So what are IDEs? So IDEs are there since more than 20 years. And they provide integrated development environments for all the things that the developer needs in order to code on their projects and their applications. So they provide a source code editor with syntax highlighting, code navigation, auto-completion. They can also check the bugs while you are typing, and they will provide quick fixes sometimes for some of the bugs. They automate a lot of the developer tasks, some things like compiling, building, packaging, running the application, and running the test. And most importantly, they provide a debugger, which allows to test a program or an application to show the application state, the stack trace, what's inside the memory. You can alt at a particular point of code, and they provide step execution as well. So the most known IDEs on the market are Eclipse, IntelliJ, and Visual Studio, but there's also others like Rational or Eclipse or Xcode. So today we are going to speak about Eclipse Che, which by opposition to the other products that I just mentioned, is a cloud-native IDE for developer teams. So it runs on the cloud, either on a public cloud or a private cloud, and the developer environment are host, so they are not running on the laptop of the developers. The only thing that is needed is a browser in order to access to the web-based IDE, and we will see that a little bit later. Before we dive a little bit deeper into Eclipse Che, we wanted to speak a little bit about the Eclipse Foundation, the open source foundation, and the place of Eclipse Che as one of the projects of the foundation. So Paul?
Thank you, Stephen. Next slide. So the Eclipse Foundation has a long track record of stewardship in open source community-based development. It's a vendor-neutral, member-driven, community-focused organization. We've got strong governance and process that allows our communities to deliver project releases on a predictable schedule with innovation on a regular cadence. Strong and effective governance model for open source development keeps everybody focused on innovation and collaboration. And there's a demonstrated sustainability model for community-based development. The Eclipse Foundation, of course, got started almost 16 years ago with the release of the Eclipse IDE. Ecosystem development and marketing is also something that the foundation focuses heavily on, producing white papers and promoting our projects and working groups through social media channels. IP governance is essential for commercial-friendly open source consumption and development, and so it's a top priority for the foundation, as well as providing infrastructure for developer and committer productivity and collaboration is core and key to what we do. Next slide, please. Strategic focus areas. There's 4 pillars that really sort of map onto the high priority and most active areas of the Eclipse Foundation. Of course, we got started with tools back with the Eclipse IDE, the Eclipse IDE has over 16 million active users and millions of downloads that happen a month. And the Eclipse tool space has broadened the cloud development tools with Che, Che for Z, Thea, and Thea. So innovation continues in the essential important area of tools. Automotive became a important area for us, and we have the OEMs, their suppliers and partners building a sustainable vendor-neutral platform for collaborating on open technologies, including autonomous driving in the automotive space. IoT and Edge is also a very vibrant area of innovation for the Eclipse community. Arguably, the largest open source industrial IoT community is at Eclipse. We've got strategic members, including Bosch, Red Hat, and Eurotech, and 37 other companies that are building an end-to-end IoT infrastructure that's secure, flexible, and fully based on open source technology and standards. In the area of cloud native Java, there's 2 marquee projects. One is Jakarta EE, which was formed when Java EE moved from Oracle to the Eclipse Foundation. The other is MicroProfile. A MicroProfile is a microservices-based architecture that builds on Java EE and now Jakarta EE to enable developers to build cloud-first Java applications. Okay, next slide. So Eclipse by the numbers. We're an organization that has a track record. We've been around and we continue to grow and diversify. 375 plus projects that we touched on a few of them in the tool space, including Che, Che for Z, Jakarta, MicroProfile. The Eclipse IDE continues to remain strong, and projects are core to what we do as an open source community. 275 plus members, that's member companies as well as individual members, and growing. 1,600 committers and growing as well. Committers are really the lifeblood of any open source community and foundation, and making committers productive and effectively collaborate is essential to what we do at the Eclipse Foundation. And measuring our impact by lines of code is always an interesting metric to track. And so right at this moment, we're at 195 million lines of code under management. 30 professional staff members really focused on serving the membership in areas of IP governance, IT support, marketing, and really keeping the lights on and making sure that the infrastructure is there and everybody knows about the good work that's happening within our projects and working groups. Working groups are consortia where companies can come together and work in support of projects and building technical roadmaps and developing marketing plans, and the kind of collaboration that really brings companies together to make a larger impact based on what they're doing in open source. And more recently, one of the working groups we created was the Eclipse Cloud Development Tools. And in that scope of that working group includes Che, Che for Z, Thea, and other tools-based projects. All right, so that wraps up my overview of Eclipse. Back to you, Stefan.
Thanks, Paul. So Eclipse Che is one of the projects of the foundation, but why Eclipse Che. So when we start to work on Eclipse Che, we figure out that a lot of the development time is spent on configuring and setting the developer environment. So about 24% of the time of a developer team a week is spent on building and maintaining the developer environment. And this time is spent on activities like onboarding on a new project, switching between different projects or different technologies, fixing a maintenance branch, reviewing a pull request, upgrading tools and plugins. We know that sometimes it does not go well, and trying out a new technology. And as much as we are moving to modern application architectures, it also increases the complexity of configuring and setting the developer environment. For monolithic applications, the source code has all the dependency graph. So the connection between the services are obvious, and the IDE understands the application and allows the developer to jump to the definition. That's how it works. But when we are moving to microservice-based applications, which are kind of becoming more and more popular this time, everything is broken up. The connections are unclear between the services, and the IDE understands each of the individual components, but not necessarily the interconnection between each of those services. So that brings and increases the complexity of setting a developer environment. And with Eclipse Che, the goal is really to make anyone at any time being able to contribute to a project without having to install anything on his machine. And if you take the developer contribution journey, you will have to scaffold this project, configure dependency, code, build, test, run, and debug the application, and integrate and optimize. So the first part is really about configuring and setting the developer environment. Then it's about using it and then integrating the feedbacks. But with all of this, the consistency, the reproducibility, and the ease of access is really a velocity factor of a developer team and really allow a developer to be more efficient. So what is needed in order to contribute to a project? Obviously, you need the project sources. You need all the dependencies as well as all the developer tools, the language tooling, the debugger, the testing tools, the security tools, etc. And all the different commands that you need in order to build, in order to run the application. You will need a terminal, you will need the operating system properly configured. Probably you will need the application server, the database, and all the different runtime components that are put in play for your application. But all of this is really difficult and really complex to share. So all the developers, they need to set up all these things each time they work on a project. So with Eclipse Che, what we did is that we redefined the concept of a workspace. We bring inside of a workspace everything that is needed for a developer in order to code, build, test, and debug his application. So we will bring the source code, we will bring the IDE, the tools, and also the runtime environment, so where the application is going to run. And we containerized all of those components. We have also containerized the IDE, so this way it does not require any installation. And we also provide a browser-based IDE, which is based on Eclipse Che, and which is providing an experience that is very close to VS Code. It provides built-in support for languages and debugger, so it supports the language server protocol and the debug adapter protocol, which are standards for IDEs, and it is used by Visual Studio Code and Eclipse. And this IDE is also providing the compatibility with VS Code extension. So the way they are running is a little bit different because they are running inside of containers. So before going even deeper, let's go into a quick demo. So I will transition to this tab. So here I have a GitHub repository. So it's a Quarkus React.js application, I'm using two different components, one for the backend and one for the frontend. The backend is written in Quarkus, it's a Java framework, and the frontend is written in Node.js, React.js, and I'm also using a Mongo database. So if I have to set up a developer environment and if I wanted to contribute to this project, I would have a lot of things that I would need to configure on my machine. I would need Maven, I would need NPM, I would need Mongo, and I will need to make sure that I have all the tools inside of my IDE to be able to work on this. What we did is that we replaced all those instructions on how I can configure my own developer environment by just a link. It's an Eclipse Che link. And if I click on it, it redirects to Eclipse Che, and it will set up, it will look for the repository, the source code, and it will look for the different tools that are needed in order to code on this application. And it will spin up all the different tools. So in order to fasten a little bit the demo, I already started. And here, once you are inside of the IDE, you arrive in an environment that is the one you are used to get if you are already using this Visual Studio Code, for example, and you have your Project Explorer. So you can browse the source code, you can access to the Java classes, for example, and the post.java file. I have the command palette, so I can navigate into all the files of my project, but I can also use it to easily start new commands inside of my IDE or do a lot of things only by using my keyboard. So this way, as a developer, I don't need to use my mouse anymore. So it detects that I open a Java file. So it starts the Java tooling, as you can see here. And you can see that you have syntax highlighting, you have code navigation, you can fold and fold the source code as you're used to get inside of your IDE. And you also have the dependencies that are retrieved by the Java tooling and all the different things that you need to get in order to be able to get auto-completion. So it's building the workspace, and once the workspace will be built, I will have the completion available. It will take just a few seconds. Here it is. So here you can see that I have auto-completion. I have the outline, which allow me to quickly navigate through the different methods of my source code. So now what I want to do is I want to start my backend. So that's the first component of my application. So I'm going into this window, which shows me all the different runtimes that I'm using inside of my application. So here I have my backend and I have my frontend. And I have all the commands that I need in order to build my application and to deploy it as well. When the application will be deployed, it will detect that my application is a start, and it will propose me to open the application. So let's open the backend. So that's just a result of my backend. As you can see here, I can preview it directly from here, but I can also open it in another browser tab if I need. Okay, so now let's start the front end of my application. And my application is starting. And here it is. So it's showing a post-it. So so you can see that my my post-it has been saved onto in my database. And what I can do here is that I can just do a quick change and put to uppercase when I will get the content. So if I refresh, you see that the change has been taken into account, and I've been able to quickly iterate on my application. So now what I would like to do is to set up a breakpoint. So let's set up a breakpoint in the editor and open the debugger, and I will attach the debugger to the running process, and I will refresh, and here it is. So you can see that it's stop, it halt at my breakpoint, and now I can edit the different variables if I want. So that's how in few seconds and few minutes I've been able to go from a GitHub repository into a developer environment where I'm all set to run a polyglot application, which is using Java and Node.js and React as well, which is using different runtimes. So it's a microservice-based application. Plus there is a Mongo database, and I have installed anything. I have just clicked on a link. So it makes the onboarding of new developers on my project very easy and very, very simple. Okay, so that's it for the first demo of today. I'm going back to the slide. So how it works. So as I mentioned previously, we containerized everything that is needed to develop for your application. So we containerize the build environment, the runtime environment, the test environment, and the debug environment, along with the tools. And the tools themselves, and that's the big difference with the traditional tools, they are completely containerized. That means that the IDE and the plugins are bringing their own runtime and dependencies. This way, the developers, they don't have to worry about the version of all the dependencies between each other, because each of the tools and each of the plugins are going to run in an isolated fashion with their own life cycle. They will be easy to upgrade, easy to switch, easy to enable. It's just a matter of using the main principle of containers and the main benefits of containers. As I mentioned earlier, the plugins and the IDE is providing compatibility with VS Code extension. So the tooling that is running inside of Che is based on VS Code extension, but it runs in a very different manner because it's running inside of the container, and it provides their dependencies and their runtime. So we are able to make the developer life easier on this way. Within Eclipse Che, you also benefit from developer environment as code. So you have a dev file, which is hosted with the source code of your project, which provide an easy to configure and highly reproducible definition of a developer environment. It's basically a declarative abstraction of the developer workspace. So it will have information about the project, the editor, the build environment, the runtime environment, and the commands that you need in order to run your project and to test it. So it's a YAML file, and here it's a basic example where we show the project information at the top. Oops, sorry. And you have the Java plugin that is enabled, and your runtime here, which is based on Java 8, and you can pass environment variables and endpoint definition. So it's quite comprehensive and easy to configure as well. The dev files are really made for team. They manage the consistency, so they manage the complexity of the developer environments, and they allow to have a clear definition of what is the developer environment that is needed to work on a project, so that I can share it with all the people and all the developers that I'm working with for my project. They are easy to integrate. They can be created from anywhere, and they can be leveraged at any point in time. You see, it's just a link that I have used from my GitHub repository and that I share on my README file that I've been able to leverage. The dev file will live with the source code, and they are easy to modify, they are easy to fork, easy to share, they are extensible, so you can customize the dev file for a particular task with a particular set of plugins that you need in order to achieve this task, or you can also customize it with the particular developer preferences as well. Eclipse Che for developer teams. So you can deploy Eclipse Che on-premise, so you can deploy that on your private cloud on any Kubernetes cluster. It will provide an operator-based installation. And it provides also the ability to install it in an air-gap environment where you will be able to pull the different tools that are needed and configure with your Maven repository, with your dependency repositories and your container registries, as well as your own source code repositories as well. It provides built-in high availability, rollout updates, and of course health check as well, because it's a cloud native application. It really makes collaborating with your team much easier and much faster with the one-click onboarding link that I introduced earlier. It provides also the ability to integrate with your LDAP or Active Directory. So you will deploy Che once, and then all the developers of your team will connect to this Eclipse Che instance. You will provide resource limits per group. You will have airbag security, pre-commit feedbacks, and it will enforce the standards to compliance as well. And finally, it's really handy to integrate Eclipse Che developer workspaces in your entire DevOps toolchain. Could be your issue tracker, your CI, or your CD. You can generate the developer environment links based on the task that you are doing, and you can embed it inside of Jira issues, or you can embed it inside of a Jenkins job. So if you have a Jenkins job that is failing, it will have a comprehensive, it will have a link which will point to a developer environment, which will help the developer to directly check out the branch which was built and which failed, and it will open the file where the error was. So it really changed the paradigm, and it provides the developer the ability to get on-demand IDEs, which will be preloaded with the context of what they need to do. And one other illustration of how Eclipse Che could be used to modernize the developer tooling is how Eclipse Che for Z is used for modernizing the mainframe developer tooling. So Dana, ending
yes.
to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to, as Stephen said, talk about the mainframe and how that we're leveraging Eclipse Che to bring new modern tooling to the mainframe software development process. So you want to move forward one more chart for me? The mainframe is still very significant to the economic world we live in. There's over 220 billion lines of just COBOL code running on the mainframe, not to include other languages. So it has a very significant part in our role. Maybe more significant to this presentation, there's over 1 billion lines of code being changed on COBOL every year, additions as well as changes. So bringing tools to the mainframe is still relevant. With 1 billion lines of code changing, there's a lot of people out there still using tools to work on the mainframe. So we think it's important that we bring this modern tooling to software development on the mainframe, because we think the mainframe ought to be, or developing on the mainframe ought to be like developing on other platforms. That as the skills, the mainframe skills that have been around for a while begin to retire, new skills, new talent are going to need to step in and fill the roles that these mainframe people have been filling. And in doing so, having modern tools and modern techniques available to them that they're used to reduces the barrier, reduces the amount of time it takes for them to get up and running on the mainframe. We're also seeing a trend where developers can do Java work and they can do COBOL work, and from time to time, they may have to jump back and forth from different languages and therefore potentially different platforms. Want to move forward one more time, Stephen? So we at Broadcom set out for a goal, and why did we choose to look at Che for Z? Well, one big reason is speed. As Stephen articulated, bringing new developers on board quickly is very important. Being able to share workspaces is equally important. And as you're talking about bringing new skills to the mainframe, being able to have quick setup is really important. Speed to access the file. So having things pre-configured and shareable so that you don't have to reconfigure things when you move from one person to another saves time. And today's tools, many of them take a lot of time, as Stephen talked about, maintaining plugins, adding new things, making sure support levels are current. With a hosted environment, that can be all managed centrally, and developers can have quick access to the latest and greatest tooling. Another big item was, from our point of view, we wanted to build common components that worked on multiple platforms. Stephen talked about how Eclipse Che is similar to Visual Studio Code, and we wanted to leverage that capability by building common components. What that means to you as a user is we can write the code once, and it's available in different platforms, Visual Studio, as well as Eclipse Che, and down the road, other IDEs, therefore providing you, the developer, pretty much an IDE of choice and access on all kinds of different devices. It also was really important from a mainframe point of view, because a lot of mainframe environments, they don't really like the fact that the code from the mainframe actually leaves the mainframe and goes onto someone's desktop. In the Eclipse Che scenario, this code is actually going onto a server. So this server could actually be in the glass house and be controlled in that space. So that's a real significant point when it comes to some mainframe shops. The ability to centrally maintain the maintenance is also very important. Being able to deploy out to lots of different mainframe thick clients has proven to be very, very time consuming and costly, especially when it comes to support. Your end users need problems solved, incompatibilities debugged, what have you. It's a real challenge and very, very time consuming. So Stephen, you want to move forward? So we set forth to build some common components, and we have developed and released as part of Che for Z, a LSP, Language Server Protocol extension for both COBOL and high-level assembler. Stephen mentioned LSP earlier. Language Server Protocol, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a language or a protocol that allows us to basically separate the advanced functions of the editor into a separate piece of code and interact over language server protocol, which allows that piece of code to run on all kinds of IDEs, any editor that supports language server protocol, LSP. As well, we have implemented debug adapter for the Broadcom mainframe debugger, and it too provides us the ability to interact with Che as well as Visual Studio Code and down the road other IDEs that support DAP. We've integrated code that allows you to access the OS assets, things like partition data sets, things like Unix system services, as well as jobs. And we've got an integrated command line interface, the Zoe command line interface, all integrated into our stack. We've also integrated the access to SCMs, Broadcom's Endeavor mainframe SCM, CA Endeavor, and we also are leveraging the Git component, which is integrated in Che to allow Git interacting with GitHub to interact with the mainframe as well. And through the Zoe CLI, we support automation, so you can actually do shell scripts, etc., and run those in the terminal as well, interacting back with mainframe assets. So these common components can either be running in Eclipse Che, and they're part of the project called Che for Z, or they're available in Visual Studio Code and the Visual Studio Code Marketplace as Code for Z. You want to move forward one more time for me, Stephen? So our strategy is to make the mainframe, as I said, like other platforms. And one of the key contributors to that strategy is to be open source driven. All of those components that are applicable outside of our proprietary backend software are open sourced, and they're part of Che for Z. And those Che for Z things are then redistributed under the marketplace in Visual Studio Code. So a big part of the Broadcom strategy is to open source and bring open source into the mainframe. So for that, I'm going to grab the screen, and this may take a moment to give everyone a quick demo. Alrighty, so what we should be looking at now is Che. So let's get started here. When you have installed Eclipse Che, the first thing you'll see is something like this dashboard. And the first thing you'll need to do as a developer is create a workspace. What Stephen did in his demo is he created that with a dev file. That works perfectly well. An alternative approach, which in my mind is a little easier, although with a dev file is not very hard either, is to come in, create a new workspace, give it a name, and then look in the stacks that are available to you. And we have released a mainframe stack, which has all the tools I'm going to demo to you in it. You click on that, give it some parameters optionally, and you say create and open. And that opens and creates a new workspace for you. It is that simple, and it's quite quick. I have a workspace already up and running, so that's what I'm going to use for demo purposes here. First thing I want to show is you've got your components over here, and we've got Git. Here's your debugger that Stephen showed, and we've got this working with the mainframe. Here's a ability to interact with our mainframe SCM called Endeavor. And what we have here is what we call Zoe Explorer. Zoe Explorer is using Zoe another open source project called Zoe to interact with the mainframe through ZOSMF. And over here, you've got data sets, you've got Unix system services, and you've got access to all your jobs. So what I wanted to show is then to come in and take this code, make a change, and then run a compile. So I'm going to go into some JCL here. We've got highlighting within the JCL as well. But I can also submit jobs from the so the job has been submitted on the mainframe. I can now search for that particular job. And the compile completed, and link edit has been done, and this created a load module. I did want to show one more thing. As I said, we've got a command line interface to the mainframe. It's called Zoe, and from Zoe, you can do all kinds of things. Zoe CLI, you can do all kinds of things. You can do interaction with Kix. You can interact with DB2, Endeavor, and our FileMaster product. You can interact with the ZOS console, ZOS files, jobs, TSO, Unix system services, ZOSMF workflows. So if you're installing and you want to automate the install process through workflows, you can do that. And all of these things are commands. So I will show you one quick one as an example. Zoe files. So this is interacting with files on the mainframe, list, data sets, and my high-level qualifier. And this is a list of all the files under my high-level qualifier. You can delete jobs. You can, not jobs. You can delete files. You can create new files. You can upload. You can download. There's all kinds of things you can do and I'll add them all to an automation script. So for time purposes, I'll jump back to the charts. And Stephen?
Yeah, thank you. So Eclipse Che is, thanks for the demo, Dana, of Eclipse Che and how it can be put in use in the context of mainframe development. So Eclipse Che is a centrally hosted developer environment. It provides the centrally hosted developer environment where everything has been containerized, all the tools that are needed, which removes the pain of configuring all those tools and all the dependencies needed. It provides a built-in editor, which is a browser-based editor. The developer environments are codified to make them very consistent, repeatable, and reproducible with all the different stakeholders of your developer team. And that provide easy onboarding and also DevOps integration. And next slide, please, Dana. And Paul, while Eclipse Che is one of the projects from Eclipse Foundation, it's also part of the cloud development tools, and there's a lot of community involvement on this aspect as well.
Yeah, there certainly is, Stephen. There's the top level project, Eclipse Cloud Development at Eclipse, has been running for a while. Che, Orion, Dirigible, and tools for Cloud Foundry exists there. and are in various stages of development. Che is actively being developed and innovation driven forward. I'm new to the top level project in 2019 was Thea, which found its technology into Che in the release that went out in the fall. Sprotty, a framework for creating graphical editors, Codewind from IBM, and a project from IBM with contribution and adoption by others for container-based development, and GLSP, a technology for creating VS Code compliant language server protocol plugins. And then of course Che 4Z was added to the Eclipse Cloud Development Tools top level project in I think it was the summer of last year. And as we've seen with Che 4Z, it brings productivity benefits to mainframe developers. It also brings benefits for developers that aren't familiar with mainframe developers but are familiar with Che. It gives them a comfortable and familiar environment for becoming mainframe developers too. So we mentioned earlier that there was a working group launched at the Eclipse Foundation in the fall that is focused on cloud development tools. Strategic members include Broadcom, Red Hat, IBM, SAP, and others, and they're all coming together to drive forward in the cloud development space, and particularly making sure that the benefits that are being driven out of those innovations remain and are focused on the productivity of mainframe developers as well. So thank you very much, Stephen. Back to you and Dana.
Yeah, and I think we have a last slide which give you some handy links if you are interested into getting involved, and we are definitely looking to get you involved into the Che community and Che 4Z community. So the website is eclipse.org/Che. You can try it without having to install it on a publicly available instance of Eclipse Che, which is available on che.openshift.io. It's an instance that is running by Red Hat. The repository where most of the guns is hanging is on GitHub, github.com eclipse/Che. You have Che 4Z project page as well, which is hosted on project.eclipse.org. And if you have any question, you can reach out to mainframedevops@broadcom.com. The community is also helping and discussing between each other on the Mattermost channel. So it's a public chat which is available to everyone. So with that, last slide is a big thank you for all of you for being with us today and listening to our presentation.
Awesome. Well, we have about 5 minutes until the top of the hour, so I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw them out to you guys, and whoever wants to answer them can. The first question is, does Che allow real-time collaboration like Google Docs?
That's a very interesting question. It's a good one. At this moment, no, but it is something that we are working with the community in order to bring inside of Eclipse Che. We have been working on a prototype in the past, but due to some priorities and some changes, we have not finalized. But if you are really interested by those capabilities, please join us and help us to bring this inside of Che.
All right, great. Let's see. Here's a good one. What is required to run Eclipse Che, and what are the components deployed?
So when you run Eclipse Che, you have to deploy a container-based application on Kubernetes. So you need a Kubernetes cluster. It can be Kubernetes, or it can be also OpenShift. And we also have a supported version of Eclipse Che running on OpenShift. which is provided by Red Hat. And the components that are deployed are Keycloak, which allows to do the authentication of users. And you also have a PostgreSQL database which is deployed, which allows to store the data of each of the users. So all of this is getting deployed on your own cluster, which can be behind your firewall if you want, but you can deploy it on a public cloud if you will as well.
Okay. All right, great. So we're about 3 minutes to the top of the hour, so I don't think we really have any more time to do questions, but please know that if we didn't get to your question, the panelists are going to get a copy of all of the questions, and they'll be more than happy to follow up with you offline. So please know that your question will be answered. Just not during the webinar here. I also promised you at the top of the hour that we'd be doing a drawing for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick before we close things out. Our winners today are Amy H. I'm not going to say the last name, but Amy H. And let's see, next winner is Jeffrey H. Lots of H's today. And our third winner is Mark H. Well, we have a trifecta of H's today. So congratulations, guys. We'll be contacting with you guys by email to get the gift card over to you. So congratulations. I do want to thank everybody who did submit questions today. Lots of really good ones. And like I said, you will be getting your question answered by our panelists offline. And I want to thank Paul, Dana, and Stephen for their kind time, the time that they spent on today's webinar, imparting some great information. So thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time. And I do want to thank the audience for joining me today. But before I go, do want to remind the audience that today's event was recorded. So if you missed any or all of the events, or if you just want to watch it again, you will be able to do so. We are going to be sending out an email that contains a link to the webinar to access it on demand. And then the webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website. So if you just go there, just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Again, gentlemen, thanks for your time, and thank you to the audience for joining me. And this is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody.